Let us say hello to one Chael P. Sonnen. Hello, Chael. How are you, my friend? Good to see you.
What's happening? Nice to see you. And by the way, full pat on the back. I'll give it to you right off the top. You have been talking about Leon. You've been putting Leon over for a period of time. And if I can just add, I was never a Leon detractor. Like, I recognize he hasn't lost a fight. I get with Belal Muhammad, but he hasn't lost a fight in over 5 years. And the last one was to Kamaru Usman before anyone really knew that Usman was Usman. Like, I don't detract from Leon. My point, though, all along is just that Usman has a gap. He's just created a gap, and he was better than the field. I just thought I would clear that up.
Yeah, but we battled, right? I mean, there were times, let's talk about this guy, you're pushing for Colby, you're pushing, and I was like, what about Leon? What about Leon? What about Leon? I mean, we had a few wars there. A couple times I thought you were really getting mad at me, and so I was wondering if you were impressed, if you were shocked, if you were surprised. What did you think of what transpired on Saturday?
Everything you just said. So let me share this with you from my perspective. We have a movie theater out here in Oregon. They showed the pay-per-view at a movie theater. So you got the popcorn, you got your pop, you got your family. It was an awesome way to take in a sporting event. Maybe they've been doing that for a while. I've never gone to a theater and seen it on this huge screen. And Errol, I almost got up and left. I mean, when they were in the 5th round, I do a quick recap show. I got to drive over to the studio. It's about 11-minute drive. I almost got up and left. I was this close because I knew that this one was done. Thank goodness I didn't blink. And that kick, I mean, it was really something special. When you want to talk about the great kicks ever in history, I know this one is labeled number 1. I don't know if that's fully accurate. Like, just by example, technique-wise, Pete Williams versus Mark Coleman would have been the perfect technique. If you want to talk dramatic factor, what Gonzaga did with Crow Cop, largely because of the fall, everything went right. And the only reason I'm being critical is this kick wasn't as perfect as people are saying. It was a car wreck. You had Kamaru dipping. If Kamaru did not dip, Kamaru is still the champion. The kick could happen and the kick could land. It was the dip by Kamaru that traded the belt traded hands.
Yeah, and do you feel like there's people who throw out lucky, they throw out fluke? How do you categorize something like this with less than a minute to go?
Sure. Well, and a tough one in that regard. I've only seen a guy break in a fight and win a fight one time. It was Randy Couture versus Pedro Hizo Part 1. And one person who did not agree with that outcome was Randy Couture. And that's still the only example that I can give you. So I thought that Dean Thomas's contribution, what was happening between rounds, the fact that Leon wasn't looking at his coach, I've never thought of it from that perspective until Dean Thomas said it, but he's right. And I think that you do start to bring in fluke, right? We're not really talking about the cage pulls. We're not talking about some of the things that had happened earlier in the fight. Maybe we should be, but Errol, this is what dreams are made of, right? You get a guy that stays in there. He stays in the fire. Leon did it, and he deserves the credit.
And it's even more impressive when you consider how the last 3 years have gone from, right? I mean, screwed over, bad luck, getting him to fight Khamzat when he had no business being in a fight with Khamzat. I mean, like, there were a lot. The corporation was trying to screw him. You can admit that, right? I mean, this guy doesn't puff his chest out. He doesn't cut a promo. He doesn't tweet. And he was an easy target. And for him to prevail, dare I say, poetic justice.
For sure. For sure. All of those things would go into the victory party, which, by the way, is what's he going to do from here, right? I realize he doesn't have a creative branch to his team, but he does not have to fight Usman. I mean, he's going to have to get out there, going to have to get in front of this, but there's other ways that he could go and he could steer this narrative. Somebody in his position that has a little bit of stroke and a little bit of power now, not to mention he's from England where the UFC is trying to do big business. There's a lot of politics that favor him if he wanted to try to sidestep that rematch.
Oh, interesting. So what do you think he should do? Like, if you're his manager right now, what would you do? What would you suggest?
Okay, well, based on seeing that fight, I mean, don't forget, his number one job is to get the most money against the easiest opponent. That is not Kamaru Usman. That is not the easiest opponent out there. Now, I don't know that Leon will do this, but George Masvidal has positioned himself a week ahead of time in a very interesting spot. If you're in Kamaru's shoes, though, don't forget, all Kamaru's going to see and all he's going to ever think about right now is just getting that title back. But there is some strategy once he calms down a little bit. By example, Kamaru versus Chimaev is an interesting match. If Kamaru is a champion, he's going to be in the main event. He's going to be out there for 25 minutes or at least scheduled for that. If Kamaru wanted to go into the contenders pool, there's some guys, there's some heavy lifting he could put in the rear view and only be scheduled for 15 minutes. I mean, not for nothing, and I don't think that's the road that Kamaru is going to go down. I'm just sharing with you, there is some thought. There's a process that's put into this. And the welterweights that are all sidestepping and going, well, this is done, and it's going to be Kamaru Usman. They have until the end of business on September 10th. Nobody at the UFC is going to step in front of what they have promised us, which is a number one contenders match between Chimaev and Diaz. They have no belt that night. So they're giving us the next best thing, which is number one contenders match. That means the clock's ticking. And you can go in a lot of interesting directions. You can get a calendar out, start to look at geography, start to look at dates that are booked. There's a lot of things that can be done. And I don't see the welterweights, aside from Masvidal, I don't even see anyone playing this game. There's a game to be played, and you got till September 10th.
Okay, so September 10th, let's say Khamzat steamrolls Nathan, right? It's not even close. He finishes him in the first round. What do you think the UFC brass does?
Well, I think that you got to understand, when you and I are sitting here and we're guessing, we're trying to say, what are they going to do? We know it's already been done. We know it's already been said. We're just trying to guess what those conversations were. I do not predict for you that Dana White had to go as far to make this match. I don't think he ever had to promise Chimaev a number one contendership. I also don't think he promised Diaz that. So when he comes and tells the audience, that's very different. That's very different. Right? We're having a conversation about Colby Covington coming back. Colby is not the easiest guy to get to the ring. And I don't think you're going to get Colby to come back if you don't sweeten it by saying, okay, this is the one. And it really does matter where those conversations came. I'll give you a great example, but Alexander Gustafsson was the number one contender. I believe it was to fight Daniel Cormier, but they needed a favor, and they needed him on short notice, and the opponent was Rumble Johnson. Gus not only lost, he lost decisively, he lost inside of a minute, and his next fight was a main event for the title because Lorenzo Fertitta had told him, here's what we're going to do. So you and I don't actually have information on what kind of horse trading has happened behind the scenes. If I was to predict for you, nobody had to promise Chimaev and nobody had to promise Diaz anything. And if those promises weren't made, once again, these guys got until September 10th to start telling their stories.
You're not advocating for Colby versus Leon, are you?
I'm not advocating that, but I will tell you that it is very possible. I think that Kamaru Usman is the obvious answer, but there's things that you and I don't know. Like, just by example, we haven't seen how long the commission is going to suspend him. We don't know if there's an injury that we don't know about, even one that a guy could faint. Kamaru is ready to go, and he wants to get there, and Leon says, I don't feel so good. Just by example, Colby Covington is the clearest number one contender the sport has, but he doesn't get a fight for the title. Colby Covington was the interim champion who never lost it and woke up one day and is no longer the interim champion. Colby Covington beat the sitting BMF, but doesn't get the belt. Like, there's some stuff that has been wildly, I don't want to say unfair, but very close to that for Colby Covington. I think you're going to have to sweeten the pot to get him in there. And there's not a lot of players left on the board. We're told that Gilbert Burns is going to be busy with Masvidal. I know that story goes back and forth, but Lahal Muhammad is busy with Sean Brady by a rumor that you started. We've got, well, but in fairness, you were the one that told us it was going to be Wonder Boy versus Rakhmonov, and I'm operating on that.
I don't start rumors, Chael. I feel very insulted by this phrasing. I mean, I report things.
Inside information that was brought to us by Ariel Helwani, but I'm sharing there's not a whole lot of guys on the board, and then make believe that Leon and Kamaru are just both going to feel great and agree to this at the same time. Historically speaking, that's a hard thing to do, and I just think there's opportunity right now. I think there's the opportunity, and guys aren't seizing it.
If I could just push back on two things. Technically, the BMF is Leon Edwards because Kamaru Usman beat Jorge Masvidal. And so from a lineal standpoint, he then became the BMF, and now Leon beat him. So I would say old Leon is now the BMF and the welterweight champion. Number two, Colby did get 2 title shots. So this idea that he hasn't gotten his due seems a little bit hollow to me.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Everything that I said is true, but you're right. It's a riddle. He's the number one contender, doesn't get a fight for the title. Well, the backstory, he already had 2 opportunities. He was the interim champion, and all of a sudden he's not. Well, the undisputed champion came back. And I understand with the BMF, I fully agree with you. It was a non-title match. I mean, I go back to the territory days. You got to put the belt up. I watched Ric Flair lose plenty of times, but it was a non-title match. So I don't know if I agree with that one. But I hear your point. And I was just trying to prove, not to be completely accurate, but that Colby is in a unique spot. And he's not the easiest guy to get in the ring. All of a sudden, you need feature matches. It's got to be a main event. There's certain things. And in fairness, he deserves them. He deserves them as the number one contender or the former interim champion or the guy that beat the BMF that didn't get recognized. I think to get Colby, you're going to have to make that promise. And if that promise is made, it does leave you with, what do you do with Usman?
Okay, so what do you do with Colby, though? Like, what is the promise, though? Because I agree with you. He's kind of the odd man out right now. There isn't a fight other than Leon that makes sense for him. I don't feel like he's in the sweepstakes. I don't feel like he's being talked about. I feel like it's Usman or Masvidal. What actually does happen to Colby? Is it
Khamzat? I hear what you're saying there. I'll tell you one that I'm not bullish on. I'm not bullish on the idea that Masvidal and Burns are going to come to an agreement. I think that Burns is the match actually for Colby. I think Colby is most likely in there, but that's very tough lifting. I mean, if you're going to go out there and you're going to fight Burns, why? What am I fighting for? And telling me my purse isn't going to do it. I'm going to need a little something. I'm guessing. But I do think as we talk about horse trading and what's done behind the scenes when we come out here and try to guess, I think that that's very possible that they're going to have to use this promise of a number one contendership. I don't think that has been promised to Chimaev and Diaz. I think that that is some moving parts that could be changed, right? You're only as good as the information you have when you make a statement. Dana didn't know that Kamaru Usman all of a sudden is going to be in the contender pool. So there's some decisions that got to be made here. It's not easy. Look, matchmaking is not as easy as we all like to pretend it is. It's very complicated.
I actually would argue strongly it's very easy, and I think I could be the best matchmaker in the business, just for the record.
What would you do? What would you do with Leon with having the information that Chimaev, who's undefeated and was promised the number one contendership, by the way, against Leon 2 years ago? What would you do knowing that he's in the mix and he's up next?
Very easy. I would do Leon Kamaru 3 in England, big stadium show, massive deal, make it UK versus the world, throw Paddy on there, throw Molly on there, Mohamed Mokaev, throw all of them. Aspinall won't be on there. He's nursing an injury. It's a shame, but you could fill up that card very easily, right? Arnold Allen, etc. Then I would do Masvidal versus Wonderboy Thompson. I mean, the treatment of Wonderboy Thompson, nicest guy in the sport, NMF champion, right? Nicest MFer in the world. You're going to feed him to Shavkat Rakhmonov, the guy who is just as good as Khamzat, yet lesser known. Like, what is that? It's a horrible matchup for him. It's an absolute horrible matchup. Gilbert versus Colby, love that idea. Khamzat wins September 10th. Let him sit on the sideline, get the winner of Usman and Leon. Easy does it.
Okay. I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, that would solve a lot of problems. Do you believe that you could get Colby to sign a contract opposite Gilbert Burns without making a promise of a number one contendership?
Tough one. And
by the way, Gilbert's not going to demand that. I feel like we all owe a lot more credit to Gilbert Burns. We generally give guys credit who are willing to go in there on short notice, who are willing to go in there with anybody. We generally praise those guys, and I don't feel like Gilbert's getting that. If there's anyone that really deserves a pat on the back for being a true competitor, it's Burns.
I don't disagree with that. Can I throw a curveball your way? A scenario that we haven't talked about, which would be insane if it happened. What if, Chael, on September 10th, Las Vegas, Nevada, old Nathan Diaz does it one more time? What if he actually pulls it off? Shocks the world. If I'm Dana White in the brass, no joke, I walk to the back. I say, all right, that was your last fight. Well played. You bet on yourself. You rolled the dice. We tried to screw you. You screwed us. Perfect. Here's $20 million. Forget Jake Paul. Title fight, England, you versus Leon 2.
I hear what you're saying, but that comes. Yes. And you know what makes this fight work, by the way? Dana found himself in a spot that he wasn't planning to be in. Like, he took a huge star in Chimaev and he put him with a huge star in Diaz, and the rest takes care of itself. Didn't really fill in the car, and there's no title, and off we go, and this is going to work. Then the odds come out. It was 8-1 from Jump Street, 8-1 beginning. 24 hours later, it was 12-1. And Dana was having to come in and almost justify why he was doing the match. And I will tell you this. There is going to be such a hype around this fight. It's not here today. It wasn't here the day that it was announced. 72 hours before that fight, and maybe as much as 96 hours, the big question of what if? What if is going to sink into all of our minds? What if Nate Diaz wins this? What if Nate Diaz has one more left in the chamber? That's what's going to everyone's going to want to see this fight when it comes around, but it's because of those two words, what if?
And I'll take it one step further. The greatest thing to happen to this fight is Leon winning. Because if Usman would have retained, even if Nate wins, no one really wants to see Nate versus Usman. I think everyone would want to see Nate versus Leon too, given how that final minute went. In fact, you yourself on Saturday night tweeted something to the effect of, Nate's the champ, right? Did you not?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, Nate Diaz had come out and he said this to the world, and we all gobbled it up, myself included. He said, the only part of a fight that matters is the high spot of the fight, and the high spot of that fight went to me. I win. And you know what? He's got me thinking twice. Like, in all fairness, he really didn't know that he had Leon hurt. And that comes back to us being unfair to Leon, right? We should all give Leon the credit, but there's something special there with Nate. And the proposition that you laid out of Dana walking in the back with a signed check saying you filling them out, Dana would do that. I mean, something to that degree, but Dana would recognize, look, you played us and you won. What do we do now? Like, that is a real possibility. Speaking of Errol, let me just use that and transition over to Paulo Costa. I mean, what do you do? Paulo Costa versus Pereira, specifically Pereira, not Adesanya, is a very interesting match. And there's nobody really positioning himself to be a number one contender there. Sean Strickland is doing it on accident by just beating guys. Paulo Costa's gone. Like, that's somebody that you also want to sit down with and try to work out a deal, in my opinion.
What a character, huh? He really sells himself, that guy. I really enjoy him. Do you like his Twitter game?
I love it. I love it.
He's
I think everything he does is clever. Yeah, I think everything he does. I like the way he steered into it. I like that he's got the secret juice and he drives everybody crazy. I like the whole thing that he looks like a rock and is coming head to head with USADA. Like, I think that whole thing works. I want that to get worked out. I want him back in the picture. I think that Luke Rockhold represented himself as well as you possibly could for your way out the door, man. I love that match.
Can I ask you one last thing on Leon? From a marketing perspective, like, you know this from YouTube and whatnot, anything you put up right now with Leon, like, people can't get enough. I can't get enough Leon content. I mean, I'm searching for it everywhere. And so could a guy like that, who no one seemed to care about going into Saturday, who everyone seems to care about after Saturday, who has elicited this emotional response from the fan base, could he be a draw even though he maybe doesn't have that, that personality that people are drawn? He doesn't have that Patty. He doesn't have that Connor it thing. But yet people love him because they see themselves in him because he's the ultimate underdog. Could he be a big-time draw for the UFC? Did the UFC just backdoor their way into another star?
I love how you laid that out, and I do know what you mean by the numbers. My numbers, when I'm talking Leon, I mean, they're just through the roof. They weren't going into this fight. Right. I didn't have a fan base over my little that was dying to see this fight coming on the back end of it. Yes, and the one thing about Leon is he really represented us. Like, if you go cheer for LeBron, just by example, whether it goes your way or not, LeBron is going to put his head down on a big stack of $100 bills in a golden bed that night. Leon's not that way. He's not just said, he's not flying around. He wasn't taking care of it. It was none of those things. This was really at a boy in a dream. He gives a shout out to his mother. I made you this promise. Look at me now. I mean, hard for me to even talk about. This was just a beautiful moment that was very genuine. But what does he do now? I want him to be smart. I want him to get a creative element to it. I want him to recognize that was a really hard fight. And there's also ways to sidestep him, at least in the short term, to get something going with somebody else. We can give Kamaru, we can pay respects where it's due, but we could do that 6 months from now and go grab a whole pile of money in between now and then. I don't think he has that side to him, but I want him to, and he deserves it.
When you were leaving that theater on Saturday night, true or false, did you say to yourself, gosh darn it, Helwani got it right again? I mean, the guy just got it right. You thought that?
I swear to goodness, first thing that I thought was, I'm going to have a text coming from Errol saying I told you so. But it was an interesting moment, Errol. I mean, when you fall apart in a fight, it's very, very hard to come back. And Leon was a defeated man. His goals had changed right in front of our eyes. His goals changed from becoming world champion to survive 25 minutes. So for him to put that out there, boom, land that kick, I mean, it really was a special moment that we could all aspire to. And there's not a lot of professional athletes, particularly at the top of their game, that you can say that about, because they've already got it made. They're already handled. This was a real moment. And, man, it was something special. I'm glad I didn't leave early. I'm glad I didn't look away.
By the way, true or false, Khamzat versus Nathan, biggest screw job since Montreal in 97.
Just on the fact that the match is being made?
Yeah, we know what's going on. We know the score, right? Last fight on the deal. Let's hurt you on the way out. I mean, in the territory days, as you mentioned, you do the job on the way out, but this isn't the territory days, right? I mean, it's the opposite. You're trying to look good on the way out as opposed to looking bad. They want him to do the job.
And when you use that vernacular, Ariel, when you're going to do a squash match, the face does the squashing. The face does not get squashed. I really think that Dana I think he found himself in a position where he's looking around going, wait a minute, I didn't think this was going to happen. And I think he's fixed it. I think he's smoothed over. But I remember Dana doing a press conference right after, and he said, hey, listen, these odds are insane. You don't do those kinds of things in our sport. And you know what? You want to know what proved Dana right? Was Saturday. You're going to tell me that Nate Diaz can't win that fight? Okay, fine. But you're going to tell me now, after what we just got reminded of, you're going to tell me that Nate can't win that fight. We all have this mythical idea that somebody is so good they could just put you on a finger and spin you around. And the world's searching for that person every day. But then we have things like Saturday that remind us these are human beings. And by the way, they weigh about the same. And by the way, they got the same tools. And by the way, nobody gets to bring a stick or tag in a friend. I think that seeing what we saw Saturday with Leon really helps Nate versus Chimaev. I think it helps to draw. I think it helps to wonder. And I stand by those two words about this fight. What if?
Tony Ferguson, Li Jingliang. You like this at 170? Don't like it.
Come on. No, I don't like it.
Wow.
No.
This is the first time you've criticized UFC matchmaking. This is big news. Frank, could we have some breaking news music?
In fairness, Errol, in the history of my life, you are correct.
Where's the breaking news? Sorry. Go ahead.
In the history of my life, you are correct. But you want to talk about Charles Oliveira and you want to talk about what a big star is. They say that him versus Gaethje was the biggest pay-per-view of the year, not to mention this year had the heavyweight fight between the champion and the undisputed, Warrior versus Hogan. And you're still telling me that Oliveira Gaethje was number one. Oliveira doesn't exist. That belt doesn't exist, and the story doesn't exist. If Tony Ferguson, who was up in the loft, had not dropped the ladder down so that Oliveira could climb up, and now we're going to bring Ferguson back. Great story. He's hanging in there. He's trade camps. He's doing things different, and you're giving him. I don't know if Leech, I don't know if that's his nickname or that's his name, and I'm not trying to be a dick. I assume you call a guy a leech like he clings to people. I assume. I have the foggiest idea how he got opposite Tony Ferguson or how we're supposed to pretend that matters.
Yeah. It's a little bit of
weird. If the Leech wins, what happens? If Tony wins, okay, great. He gets another fight. He holds onto his grip. The Leech, no, I don't love it. I don't love it. I don't think that should have been breaking news. I don't think there should have been a press conference. I don't think it was worthy. That's the kind of fight you lay out the card and then you just mention it.
And also happening in 2 weeks, right? I mean, Tony doesn't get a lot of time. He just got brutally knocked out back in May against Michael Chandler. That's a tough one to swallow. Wanted to ask you about another situation that has been brewing as of late. Actually, there's a few that I want to ask you about, but your old friend, Ricky Simone, is in the mix. How about that, right? That was very nice to see. You've been telling me about him for quite some time. What would you do at 35 here? We've got Aljo and Dillashaw fighting, but there's like a Grand Prix. I've been labeling it the Grand Prix at 135. You have Cheeto first up, then you had Merab second up. Next up, you have Sanhagen and Song Yadong. Then you have O'Malley Yan, and then you have the title fight. Who's the number one contender here at 35? Like, what is the number one contender fight? And where does Henry Cejudo, to steal an old phrase, how does he fit into all of this?
Right. So to name drop, I worked out with Ricky Simone yesterday, and he is more than happy to go along to get along. It's the only complaint I would have about it. Works his ass off and a fantastic fighter. He's got to win over Merab, all these different things. But wherever they place him, he's happy with. And I just hung up the phone with Henry, who is now Coach Henry. Been working with Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson's going to rematch in one championship this Friday, just by example. So I was getting a little insight on that. I don't know. If you want me to tell you my answer, it feels as though if Sean O'Malley wins, Sean will be fighting for a championship. That's what it feels. I don't believe that's the number one contenders match because I don't think if Aljo wins that they're going to redo Jan versus Aljo. If Dillashaw wins, then maybe Jan gets to slide in that conversation. I think that Cheeto's been overlooked. I'd imagine that's frustrating. I mean, I know that the Sugar State Athletic Commission reversed that match to a no contest, but if that hadn't happened, it's one of those spots where I beat a guy, but the guy's a big, right? Cheeto's really coming through. I mean, Cheeto is really making his name and solidifying that spot. So I do think that he has some opportunity there, but I don't think the calendar lines up for Cheeto. I don't think Cheeto's going to want to sit and wait for that fight to get done. I think he's going to want to get busy, get active. Maybe that creates room for somebody like Ricky Simone if he get up and make it known that he wants to do that. But that's still, I'm looking at Sean specifically, not a number one contenders match, right. Number one contender. If Sean wins, I'm looking at that.
You think Dominic retires?
At some point in here, you said we had a minute left, so I'm talking as fast as I know how.
No, you have you have as long as you want. Do you have to go? Do you have to go?
No, I thought I heard you say in the very beginning with 1 minute left. So I've been talking as fast as I can.
Are you kidding me? You're the last guest of the day. I mean, we could go 2 hours. Chill out. Have a Mean Street coffee.
Oh, calm down. But, you got to play the game that you're comparing with. It's like if you told me what a great slice of pizza was, it's not that you're comparing it to the other pizzas, right? Who's a great dancer? But you're comparing it to the other people at the prom. And I just think you have to play the game that the others are playing around you. So when you have somebody like Sean O'Malley, who's playing a different game, you can either match him to try to cross him out, do better than him to try to get in front of him, or you're going to get left behind. And I feel that Sean O'Malley, with this big, beautiful record, he even got the Sugar State Athletic Commission to remove that. So technically, he's undefeated. He's in a feature fight against a former world champion. I mean, if you don't like that, you still got to play that game. Whether you think that that's a part of it or a piece or that your mouth should matter, if one guy's playing it, you don't have a choice. And Sean's doing that exponentially better and different than anybody. And has Sean come on your show and he had some dude in the background that was playing like the Virgil gimmick where the guy went, that's brilliant. Hey, that's simple. That stuff's brilliant.
It was like Diesel and Shawn Michaels back in the day. He was just standing behind him. I was just wondering, do you think Dom is going to retire or should retire?
You said it's like Diesel and Shawn Michaels. You don't like the example I gave? I said it was like Virgil. You got a problem with Virgil?
Because Diesel was more like stoic, big guy behind him. Virgil was treated more with disrespect, right? He was like, hey, shine my shoes. So I actually feel like my example was a little more apropos.
I invite people to come on my podcast, Daryl, and people that don't want to come on ignore me as though they didn't get the email or they've changed their number in the text and it comes through. Diesel is the only person to write me back to tell me he didn't want to come on the show.
Why? Why?
The time. He actually 2 words. It's the only words I've ever spoken to Kevin Nash. He wrote back, "No thanks."
Wow. How'd you get his info?
He's a cool heel, man. Diesel was a cool. He did a great job. He's so cool in his shoot interviews to this day. His hair's all changed and he's gray. He still pops on camera. I got his info. I don't know. I might have got it from Hall or I might have got it from X-Pac. X-Pac's the opposite of everybody. X-Pac is the most responsive star I've ever come across. And Nash was pretty quick too. He just didn't give me the answer I wanted.
By the way, what's up with you and John Cena? You went on like a rant on this guy on Twitter and people kept at what's the beef? What's the story there?
Okay. This actually all ties into Dave Meltzer. I don't have a big heart on for John Cena. I respect a guy that respects his career enough to stick a needle in his ass every now and then. I really do. Dave Meltzer came out and was doing this whole thing about Cena's innocent. And Cena said people that do steroids should be stuck in prison. And I was so irritated at what a mark that Meltzer was for a dude that is clearly juiced out of his mind. It just frustrated me. He did nothing. He's having a great life and he's cloaked in success. That made me jealous. There's a reason jealousy is one of the 7 deadly sins. I admit it. I'm jealous of John Cena. So I took some shots at him. What else do you want?
Wow. Did you hear from him?
Well, and what a dork. I mean, he's on Twitter in all fairness. It's not his Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about it. Like,
what is going on with that Twitter? It's very weird.
Right. You're responsible. But a guy that has a Twitter account gets a whole bunch of followers, and then it's not him. It's somebody else. And he's putting out these things like a fortune cookie. Like, it's just weird. And people are flocking to it and retweeting it. It's like, you're all a bunch of nerds. I mean, that's a nerdy thing to do, and you're the king of the nerds.
I agree.
So I'm taking the shots. I said, no, he hasn't responded. He doesn't see it. He's not on Twitter. He's not talking to these people. They're just following a ghost.
Say what you will about The Rock, the man, in my opinion. At least he's engaging with people. It's him. It's his voice. Maybe someone's writing it for him, but you could tell that's him. Like, you know what I mean? I respect that. By the way, what do you think of the business? The business right now, Trips is doing a great job.
Yes, I think that I never thought they'd get Vince. I mean, I never thought they'd get Vince. I don't know Vince McMahon. I know 10 people he's had sexual relations with. 8 of them are women. All of them are consensual. Everybody was above age. No, this is true. And I don't know him. I could tell you about a limousine parked outside of Princeton University. I mean, I could go through and give you his business. I could tell you about his office. I could tell you about his flight attendant. I could tell you about the time Linda walked in. I didn't think they'd get him. They got the king. And I do look, he was $5 million behind when they got. Now he stepped aside. They're at $20 million. They're not done yet. They are not done yet. The way that Vince has packed here, you want to hear a great Vince story?
Tell me.
100% true story. But this was just normal, right? This was just the way that business went. So Vince has contract that you sign. Everybody gets the same deal. They get X amount of money and they get a home in Trump Tower in New York. It's 100% true. He's got 5 mistresses living in the brilliance. He owns the penthouse. So Vince goes and works these deals. He puts them all in the same deal, and then he goes and sees them all. And I don't even know the guy. I mean, come on. This is brilliant stuff. There's ways he could have worked these stories into it. These are true and happening right now, and I don't even know the guy. I thought he could tiptoe around this. Do you know the things you got to do to get on Monday Night Raw? You know the tulips that you got to plant to get a spot on WrestleMania? All of a sudden, he's letting people on the board? Come on, he should have had this whole thing wired. He should have had the whole thing dialed. And you know what? I think that he does. How else do you think his son-in-law, who got caught fishing off the company pier himself and got put on the sidelines, then all of a sudden he's back in? Vince is still in charge. And he should be. Oh,
you think he's still calling the shots?
You think Triple H is going to tell Mr. McMahon anything? Hell no.
But there's a big direction change.
Anything but yes.
But there's a big direction change. I mean, it's palpable. Who else is in charge? I mean, it's not the same as it was a month ago. So shouldn't Triple H get the credit for that?
Sure. If his name's on it, I think that he should. But I still do. But that was a real shock for me. It was a real shock for me when he went down. When the whole Me Too thing went, I remember thinking to myself, there goes Vince. And he found his way around it. Now, all of a sudden, he didn't have his board under control. Or did he? I mean, I think it's a very fair question by me. All of a sudden, you got the daughter back in, you got Trips back in. Both were put on the sideline. They shut down NXT. They shut down anything that Triple H did, and they drew a black line through it. And now all of a sudden, he's back in. I think that it's relevant. I think that Vince is still in charge. And look, it's all an angle. It's all at work. I'm saying this for entertainment, but I would be entertained by that. I would entertain how the inner workings went. I would be entertained on what a daily basis of of Vince McMahon is, who loves the wrestling business and only knows one thing. I would find that fascinating if he was smart enough to get a director and editor there and a producer and change the look of the field. Give credit to Triple H when it's actually him. What else do you think Vince is doing all day? You think he's over there at Trump Tower in the penthouse? I mean, come on. A lot of hours in the day. There's only 5 mistresses stuck up over there. What do you want to do?
Oh, my. Earlier this morning, by the way, Jake Paul tweeted, done deal October. Who's his opponent?
You're so glad I brought that up. You're so glad that I put that in your show. You didn't have to be. You're so happy to talk about a limo outside of Prince. I'm talking about flight attendants. I'm talking about Linda walking in and getting files. Well, you know this whole thing to be true. You tried to scoff when I said I know 10 people and 8 are female. You know exactly what I'm getting. You're so happy that it's here, but you didn't have to say it. You know what, Errol? You're welcome. You're right for that. You're right to be happy, and you're welcome. It's why you had me on.
It's actually not. I had no idea we talk about Vince McMahon. I just wanted you to give me my flowers over the Leon Edwards stuff.
Intra workings of a non-disclosure agreement that Vince had. How would I have that information? How would I possibly have that? It's a boilerplate. You insert a new name that you get $1 million and you get a place in Trump. Like, how would I? You're so happy that came out on your show. Oh, and your hands are clean, by the way. I'm going to HR. You're sitting over there with a big old pina colada, and you still got it. Oh my God, did my old buddy Chael ever pull through or what?
By the way, I was watching. They did this simulcast thing with the Gronks. You probably don't even know who the Gronks are on Saturday. Do you know who the Gronks are? Gronkowski?
Yes.
Wow, I'm shocked.
Yes.
I'm absolutely shocked that you know who that is. Do you know one of the first things I pitched when I went to the Worldwide Leader? One of the first things on the first day was an Ariel and the Bad Guy watch along where we sit together and just, we shoot on the business and people can watch the card with us. Of course, it never went anywhere. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, all right, I'm going to take credit for this idea.
Yes. Well, hey, in some part, I thought that Eves did a great job. I think that was kind of a hard ship. Gronk is cool. That's not a word you got to use a lot. Like you brought up The Rock earlier. The Rock's cool. Not only do the girls like him, the guys like him. Like he's just this cool thing. I think that Gronk has some of that. I was a little surprised to see him over in MMA. But in all fairness, I'm open to the idea. They had some jobber sitting on the stage wearing sunglasses, which lost credit for me just for doing that. Like if you're looking for a shtick in an angle and you put on sunglasses, the first guy that did it, full props. That guy, bit of a dork.
Right. Yeah. By the way, what about Sabatello calling himself the Italian gangster? You got to like him. His promo work is fantastic over in Bellator. Have you seen him?
Yes. And I agree. I think he's great.
You enjoy him?
Yes, I do. Hey, speaking of Bellator, I thought the big news over the weekend, they loan out MVP who ends in there. How is Perry beating all these guys? I mean, Perry's winning fights that are deep and they're late. He's kind of known for not having a work ethic and being fully tied to a gym. Guys like that don't win fights late. They don't have heart because they don't have the conditioning. Come on, Perry. Perry's found himself at home, man. Perry can box.
He can box, and also he's kind of gone independent, right? He can do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He's trying to get the Jake Paul fight. I don't think it's going to happen. But I want to go back to that previous question. What do you think? Jake Paul, Anderson Silva? You think that's the one?
Yes, I'm all for it. Listen, Dana came out. It was actually Logan that Dana was speaking about, but said, Logan, go in there and fight Anderson. I don't know why that never blew up. I mean, one thing about Anderson Silva, all the way back when I was having my beef with him, is he really believes that you go in the gym, you keep your head down, and you go out there and compete with whoever. I think that Anderson's left a lot on the table. And I think Anderson versus one of the Paul brothers, I mean, even if they go and get this fight done, this fight should have been done. The money should be in the bank 2 years ago. And Anderson's never called for it. He's never really balked. That's just kind of a part of who he is. I think it's a miss. I think there's big opportunity. I think the entertainment era is still upon us. It's not going to be here forever. And I do think that Anderson should be in there with one of the Pauls. If it's going to be Jake, okay, fine.
Okay, 2 last things. What's up with you and Chris Curtis? I mean, such a lovely guy. You guys are going back and forth. He has his heart broken. I mean, what's happening? I tried to defend, but I don't know. He just seems like such a lovely guy, and you guys were going back and forth.
Okay. So he and I have made up, just so you understand.
Oh, wow.
He was given information that was inaccurate. He thought that I came out and put him down, and it simply did not happen. So I had to send him this piece. I mean, it turned into this whole thing, and he was coming at me. It was like 3 a.m. Most people aren't even up. Now he's got me all worked up. I've already called Sean. Hey, Sean, you're fighting. Turns out that's like Sean's only friend. I call Miami and tell Colby, hey, you're an 85-pounder now. I'll explain later. It's this whole thing. And then Curtis and I work it out. And now we talk every few days. He was a little bit down because of the loss. I would not kick a guy when he was down. He was down and was told that I kicked. I mean, I got an ego. I got a fire back. It's one of these spots, but it all worked out. And I agree with you. He is quite a sweet person.
By the way, you just made me think of something tying this all together. Izzy beats Pereira on November 12th, sign me up for Izzy and Colby, 85. Why not?
Yes. I fully agree with
that's the play right there, maybe for him.
I fully agree with you. And only one thing. So Colby came out and he was talking to people. He was trying to find himself a fight. And he said, I'll even go down to 155. Because he said those words, somewhere that planted a seed where Dana goes, okay, he's not on the big side of 70. He's on the small side of 70. So when we brought Dana the suggestion of letting your number one contender move up, use that golden ticket, but cash it in a middleweight, Dana just wasn't open to it. If I move him anywhere, I'm going to move him to 55. So there was like this reprogramming that kind of bit us a little bit, because I agree with you. And I don't see anybody position himself for Izzy, largely because they're all scared of him. Nobody's positioned for Pierre because they don't think that he can win. It's a miss, man. The middleweights are really missing right now. Then you got the Terminator, who everybody wants to see, but he doesn't have a contract on. So the last thing he's going to do is come out and help an organization that he's currently in. It's just one of these spots. I think that there's some real misses at middleweight.
And when you say us, what do you mean by us?
Did I slip an us in there?
Yeah. What is that? Are you managing Colby?
Oh, no, but I was helping. I was trying to get that story out. Colby, that was legit. I had spoke to Colby. Colby wanted to go up, use that ticket, if you will, which I know is figurative and not a real thing, but he is a number one contender who couldn't get a championship fight, and use it for Izzy. And it was to the point that Izzy was responding. Izzy was talking about saying, look, I don't think he's going to come. But that's where all this dialogue starts. Colby was all for it when it finally got to Dana, and it did get to Dana. Dana had just heard Colby say that he would go down, not up. And Dana just thought, oh, he's too small. It got dismissed. I was like, wait a minute, let us run that one back. We'll go up. Okay, I am doing the we thing. I notice I'm doing the we thing. Fine. We are number one contenders.
Wow, I love it. Can you get Colby back on the show? He's mad at me. I don't know if it's a work or a shoot, but we used to be tight, and then he stabbed me in the back. I actually went to war for him at ESPN. They tried to get me to take off the hat, take this, that. I was like, no, let him be. Now he doesn't like me.
I remember that well. I did not know he didn't like you. And I will happily try to patch that if I can.
Thank you. Last thing, December 10th. Who's Jon Jones fighting, and is he winning?
I said 10 people. I said 8 of them. I mean, but that's a big deal. That's a selection. Jim Roman, the Smack Off. You're so happy you have that. Jim Roman, the Smack Off. I go on that every year. It's actually the one competition that I still have. I love to compete. I have nowhere to do it at. So I go compete on the Smack Off. I didn't go on this year.
Why?
And when the whole Smack Off ended, I really regretted not having gone on. And my whole shtick was going to be the one that I just gave you on Vince. I was going to drop the Trump Tower. I was in the limousine and the office and the flight. I was going to bring all this stuff up. You know what? I would have won the Smack Off. I chickened out. I won't make that mistake again. What is your question? What are we talking about? Oh, I can't remember. So every year, Jim has called me or reached out personally, and he didn't do that this year. A producer reached out to me, so then my little feelings were hurt, and I didn't go on. But I regret it. I shot myself in the foot. It was a missed opportunity by me. I didn't get the crown right now. I don't won the Smack Off. I had the greatest bit. I thought Mike and Indy was going to call in. He did it. Brad self-imploded. Leif didn't pull a big shtick. It was all Chaels, and I chickened out. 80% of success is just showing up, and I knew that lesson.
One of my favorite quotes. In fact, they tried to get me one time to go up against you. I said I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't fight. I mean, first of all, I didn't want you to do the job. I didn't want to go over, but also I respect you too much. I didn't feel like it was fair to fight you. The question was December 10th, Jones versus, and does he win? What do you say?
Stipe, is that set? Is that on?
No,
it's only been
No, they're trying to do Francis. This is the story. They're trying to do Francis. Francis not ready, so Stipe's on the sidelines on ice, and then they might bring in Stipe. The question is, if Francis walks, do they make that for a title?
Okay, you just shared a whole lot of things that I did not know. I mean, we as an industry have been promising each other it's going to be Jones versus Stipe. We've even disclosed that we've decided it's going to be for an interim championship unless we get things worked out with Francis. It was Michael that suggested, look, enough time has gone by. Don't bring Stipe in. Just wait until we can do Jon and Francis and have Stipe fight the winner. And it sounded silly when Bisping said it, but as each day turns into weeks, turns into months, I'm starting to see more and more Bisping's point. And now you laying that out, thinking they're going to get things patched up with Francis. I mean, that would be the dream match.
No, I'm saying they want to get it patched. I don't know if they will. That's plan A. Plan B would be Stipe.
Yeah. I fully understand what you're saying, but here's the deal. I've been very open to the Jon Jones experiment. The experiment being walk away from 205, take X amount of time, get the weight on, go in there. Now, tell the audience that Jon Jones, the unbeatable, is going to have a test that he's never had before, which is a guy that is a lot bigger than him. Like, I think that idea works. The problem when you bring in Stipe, who's weighed in at 231, 233, and 235 consecutively, is Jon's bigger. Now the story that you have, you're going to get him on the scale, and all of a sudden that whole thing's going to go up in smoke. So I do think that there's a relevance to Francis. I don't know what has delayed Stipe. I can't remember what your question is, but I am open to Jon coming back, and whoever they want to put in there with it, there's got to be a belt of some kind up, whether it's interim or it's undisputed.
Unbelievable. Just like an old school Wednesday. Ariel and the bad guy, thank you for the time as always. I know you appreciated 10-7 Jake Paul over the weekend. You're welcome for that. I did that for you, just for the record.
10 people, 8 of them women.
Thank you, Chael. Kaboom. There he is, Chael P. Wow, what a guy.